Hey, Bomb Squad, if you're a comedian or a podcaster looking for an affordable website solution with a modern look, then we recommend Puck's Hub. With a Puck's Hub website, you can set up your new website in minutes with easy-to-use pre-built templates. Puck's Hub websites are customizable and can easily be integrated with other platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The best part? Puck's Hub plans are only $5 per month. We use Puck's Hub for our website at the Art of Bombing podcast, and we think you should too. That's why we've partnered with Puck's Hub to offer listeners a free 60-day trial. Head over to puckshub.com to subscribe and use promo code AOBPOD at checkout for your 60-day free trial, and then pay only $5 per month after that. Take your career to the next level with your own Puck's Hub website today.
Dan Bublitz Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to an all-new episode of The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs Callbacks, where Josh and I call back the most recent episode. And in this rendition of Callbacks, we are calling back episode 285 with our good friend Neil Rubenstein. And it was a great episode.
It was.
285. Can you believe that?
285, man.
We're approaching 300.
We're almost to your bench press max.
We've passed my bench.
We have?
Oh, yeah.
Not long
I'd be lucky
ago.
if I could do 100.
Okay, gun show. All right.
I got weak little arms. All my arms are good for are collecting tattoos.
Yeah, dude. Have you added on recently? I feel like there's
I did.
What?
Well, yeah, because I got this bad boy, which is
the LOL.
The LOL. It's the logo from Laugh Out Loveland, which nice. I recorded this episode with Neil that we had was recorded during the Laugh Out Loveland Festival, or actually the day after, I should say. It was right before he left my house.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't watching the video version of this, that's on Dan's wrist, right where he would kill himself.
Exactly. It's a comedy-related tattoo, so it should go to a comedy-related suicide.
Yeah, which a lot of comedians are into. You know, there's a lot of depression that, not that we're making light of.
Yeah,
it, but
no, seriously. If you do, I'm going to throw this out there. If you do suffer from depression, or you are thinking about, killing yourself or that kind of thing, please reach out to a suicide hotline or reach out to somebody. We don't, we're joking, but we are, that is a very serious topic and it's near and dear to my heart. So now that we got all serious, we should talk about this episode with Neil. And before we do, this is your opportunity. We're going to take a quick pause so you can go listen to episode 285. So then you'll know what we're talking about. So go do it. All right, we're back.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that episode.
Dude, standing here for an hour really sucks.
I know, man. That's why you need a chair. Minutes. You need to you're standing in this, your blue wall, white wall window, and I'm sitting in this busyness. Yeah. But see, I didn't have to. I have all these things to distract me for an hour. And you just stood there. Yeah, you don't.
I did work out some new jokes. Now,
okay.
with Neil, a couple of good things came up on this one, and so he says this a bunch of times, and I just think it deserves its own call out here. Buying equity.
I love that, and I love that description or that name for what it is, because it is a topic that we've talked about a lot, but we call it something else when we talk about it. But that is the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this, you both, when you were talking about it, specifically described it as rapport.
Mm-hmm.
And rapport is different than a relationship, right?
Yep.
Like, and in comedy, you're not developing a relationship with the audience, because you can have a relationship with somebody who just totally hates your guts. You're developing something mutual.
And that there is bombing.
Right. So mutual trust and respect for one another is kind of an encapsulated, paraphrased version of what you'd find in the dictionary for rapport. Because I was like, man, that's a real distinct word. I looked it up, and it's about having a mutual sharing of trust and respect, and that's really what the audience needs for you to then go out and do something edgier. And he talks about how what it's like when he doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
And it's interesting too, like how that works. I mean, if you don't build that rapport, there's just things you're not going to get away with an audience. You have to be careful on how you present, when you present. Another thing that he talked about when we were kind of talking about this is how, his metaphor was throwing pillows, which is, a way to describe to soften up the blow that's coming up.
right,
If you're going to talk
right.
about something dark and edgy, you need to put things out there that are more lighthearted. So it's basically creating balance. It's the opposite of what you're about to do. You throw out all these, pillows, life tubes or whatever, that
Yeah.
way when it hits, they're ready for it.
Equity is something that you develop and spend. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other reason I like the phraseology that he's using is that I he throws the pillows out so he can hit him with the blow. It's another analogy to describe the same thing. But like, I can spend that built trust on edgier, darker, more personal material that an audience needs to have in order to develop the context to know why it's personal to you.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I feel like in a lot of settings, you need that in order to tell a longer, more complex story.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good point. Because if you don't have that, if you have a long story that doesn't necessarily have a bunch of punches or laugh lines, and it takes a little more build up, you're going to need that equity, because you're going to, like you said, you need to cash in some of that.
That's right. Yeah. So you get it, and then you're able to spend it. And I think that's, it's such an important thing. And as you listen to the episode, he talks about times where he's not able to do that and what happens. And I think that happens to a lot of these bombing stories that we hear, is that they go for some big joke that's worked in the past. And that's what can be so deceptive about, like, coming up in the open mic scene, which we all do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you get comfortable with the same rotating group of comedians that you see often at these open mics, and they begin getting to know you out of context off stage, and they begin to laugh at some of the silliness that you're doing on stage in ways that other audiences won't.
Mm-hmm.
I was hosting a show. I used to have a regular comedy show in downtown Kansas City that went away with COVID, and just had one of those things that hasn't come back yet. And I had a newer comedian. We've talked about why this is a don't of comedy, but I had a newer comedian up on stage hosting the show, and she opens the show with a really raunchy bit, like, and doesn't necessarily take into account the fact that the audience is eating, which is just not a well-timed joke. So she was so disappointed in the performance of that joke because it had worked so many times before. She's like, no, I open with something that I'm really confident in. That joke works. I'm like, it probably does with your friends when they're not eating.
Or in an audience that has been warmed up.
Yes.
That's the other thing. I mean, and I just, a little sidebar for people listening and watching, if you are hosting a show, you need to really think about this, because you come up cold, you have zero equity. and you're setting the precedent for the rest of the show. Like, you're establishing a bar. Even if you don't do well or you don't feel like you did well, you're still setting some sort of precedent for a show that there's going to be comedy. You're getting the people, their psyche ready for comedy. And if you start off with something super raunchy or gross or whatever right off the bat, now you've kind of ruined it. And now they're going to be, the people listening or watching, if that's not their kind of humor, chances are they're going to come in and out for the whole rest of the show, because they're going to be turned off by the show. They're going to think that's what they're going to expect the rest of the show. You're setting an expectation. That's, I guess, what I'm getting at. And so you got to be careful with, your material that you're using right off the top.
And as a host, you have to think of yourself as the one developing the equity for everyone else to cash in on, in a way.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can also be the one who walks part of the audience before any of the other comics get a chance to go.
Yep. And you're establishing the energy as well. If you come up and you're all, sad or depressed, or, people can feed off that energy, that's going to set the vibe for the whole rest of the show as well. So, you're definitely there to establish equity for the show as a whole.
Neil also talks about setting expectations for what makes a particular show successful.
That was a great transition. Talking about setting expectations as the host.
There you go. And he does it there. Now, what he sounds like he's alluding to there, like expectations for what makes a particular kind of performance successful in the episode. A lot of his examples are not comedy shows.
He doesn't do, he does a lot of comedy shows, but he's getting to where more and more he's doing more music related shows.
That's right.
Opening for bands and stuff.
You're essentially the MC all night for that. You can call it a comedy show and say that you're doing a set, but really you're hosting, you're MCing, you're warming up the crowd. Just to use his examples.
Yeah. You're a support.
You're supporting it.
Yep.
So what I think the lesson that he brings us there is, I can't be too mad at myself for not crushing like a headliner or a feature, because I wasn't one of those things. I was actually, because of the nature of the show itself, I had to reconcile with the fact that it wasn't about me. And therefore my metric to determine whether the show was good or bad can't be about how funny I am or what the audience's reaction to me was. It has to be how well I did, in his case, setting this up for the band to take stage.
Yep, and, absolutely.
And when you do corporate gigs, a lot of times it's going to be really ancillary, to a lot of these different things, right? Like you might be doing a trivia night as a comedian, right? And just hosting a game that you're getting people to play. Or you might be doing a talk that's more educational and something that they came to learn, but you're using your comedy to convey that talk.
Yep.
And you kind of have to, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, as we record this, the day that we're recording, not the day that this releases, I'm going to be going, and essentially I'm MCing a wedding tonight.
Oh, see?
I'm going to be doing some comedy. Where they're doing some wedding pub trivia, some ad-lib stuff, and some other fun activities that I'm going to be hosting. And the whole reason that, that I got this gig is because of the comedy chops. That's what they want. Somebody that's going to be entertaining and, and will give the crowd a good time.
Yeah. So let's use this example. What's your metric for how you do well tonight?
Well, for me tonight, it's really, because it's not about me. I already know that going into it. I think that's
a wedding. No,
we know. I've already had a couple. That's a whole nother podcast.
There you go.
But no, I think knowing that, and that's something I feel like comes with experience. The more experience you have with shows and the different, being able to compartmentalizing different types of shows and that kind of thing, you learn over the years. And for me going in, I already know this isn't about me, and it's not like a standard comedy show either. We're doing activities, and I'm going to be telling some stand up, but it's not all stand up. I'm doing, I'm going to be hosting trivia, so I got to make that fun, and doing some other stuff where I got to try to make it fun and entertaining. And so for me, my metric is if the bride and groom who hired me, if they're happy, if they're having a good time, that means I'm doing well.
Nice.
If I go in there and I bomb, or I'm just, I wasn't good at hosting or doing that kind of thing, like, I'm confident that that's not going to be the case because I've got lots of experience. But if this is my first kind of gig like this and I was nervous, and that could, you get clammed up and not very bubbly or entertaining, and bosh the whole show, and then they're not happy, then I know I failed.
Right.
Everybody else at their wedding, I want them to have a good time and I want them to be entertained, but I'm not using them as a metric because they didn't hire me. And this is the way I feel a lot with corporate gigs. Is the same thing, as that you're going to be performing to different types of people and groups of people, and for different circumstances, whether it's a team building or holiday party, whatever it might be. The main goal for any of those is whoever hired you, making sure that they're happy and they're not going to be the ones getting in trouble because you did something, that kind of thing. So
Right.
that's always the expectation or the metric that I set, is as long as the people who hired me are happy with whatever I'm doing, then I've done my job and I've done it well.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
obviously,
that's
I want to go crush with everybody and
sure.
gain new fans, because it is an opportunity for that.
Yeah. And as comics, it's hard to let go of that. It's hard to say what you just said, which is, I want to show up and make sure that the bride and groom are having a good time. As long as that's going on, that is my metric for success, and that's how I
Mhm.
determine how the night went. And that may come at the expense of what I traditionally want as a comedian, which is for people to laugh at my jokes. That may not. You can totally have no joke hit tonight and still
Yep.
accomplish your goal.
Absolutely. And that, and like I said, that's something you learn over time and you gain with experience, knowing that could be the case. And I think, it's important too, because it kind of goes into that, building equity. In this case, my job, while I'm there to be entertaining, my job is to support the bride and groom in their overall experience with this wedding. I'm there to try to entertain their friends and family, host the games and do all these things, so that at the end of the day, or at the end of the night, they're the stars. The people are gonna be like, oh man, that was so great that you guys brought in a comedian, and he was so fun and this and that. And then they're getting all the accolades and all the praises, because that's what I'm there. I'm the support, I'm not the main attraction. The bride and groom are.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. I think we've covered some great stuff from the episode, and we've got a lot more in episode 285.
Yeah. You mean episode 286 coming up? Because or are you calling back episode 285?
Yeah, we just we're calling back episode 285. That's
Oh,
what this
okay.
is.
So I thought you were talking about the next week's episode that'll be coming out. That's where I was confused.
Oh, no.
You were just saying
that's
there was
weird.
more to listen to in episode 285.
More, yeah. Go back to 285. Enjoy the episode if you haven't already. You
Yeah.
should have already enjoyed it. And
Yeah,
if
you should have
didn't,
already enjoyed it.
Shame on you. Go back and do it.
Yeah, I do. Before we go though, because I do want to just quick, meant to do this when we were talking about equity. Do you have an example of a time when you didn't have enough equity? I know I have,
Oh.
because I've been exploring more, I guess darker, not really edgier, but darker subjects. And so
Absolutely.
I've really been fascinated with this concept here in the last few weeks, because I've been working on material about my mom passing away and having younger
Mhm.
parents and things like that, that kind of lead into a more of a darker area. So
Yeah. I don't really have like a lot of darker stuff. It can be a little edgy, sure. But it's not necessarily something that I would say dark that's on the level of what you just described.
yeah.
Where I have to build my equity is to get the audience's trust to take them for a longer story.
Hmm.
Even if the story's punchy, you still have to have their attention and maintain it to
Yep.
connect everything to get it to be punchy. So yeah, my story is I was hosting a show that happened And, I went up in between acts, and there's probably a lot of logistical reasons why this didn't work out as well. I had already kind of established myself as the producer slash, guy who brings the next act out. I'm
Yep.
the MC essentially. And so they're not necessarily there for me. I'm there to support. And that's my role. And I had the wrong metric for it to kind of call back what we're talking about right now. But at the same time, I had no equity developed with the audience in order to tell the story. I went straight into a story, and it's totally worked before a lot of time, right? Because people are like bought in, but I wasn't thinking that, well, in that case, there were already several comedians. The audience is leaning forward. They're having a good time. The energy is up, and they're listening really closely to everything we're saying. And you can walk out and just drop a story in there, and it'll be great. But when you're starting cold and I haven't earned their trust, they don't necessarily know me. They don't really they don't even know if this is going to be a good show yet. And then I open with something really, kind of complex story type situation. It just didn't go well because I didn't have the equity. And so that was a big lesson to me. And the next time I went out, I was featuring, but I was first. So we just did the show a little differently, where we had a 30, we had a 10, and then we had an hour. And I was coming out and we wanted to start with a longer set, and that's just what the headliner wanted to do. So I went out and I remembered that lesson, and I said, okay, I'm going to start with those pillows. I'm going to start with these smaller bits that are introductory, that are easy to grab, short. And it totally worked. And then later, when my story started coming out, they were ready for them. They were listening, warmed up, and they crushed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I, like I said, experimenting with this new stuff that I've been doing. That's kind of what I found is that, if I come right out the bat, right out of the gate, talking about that, it tends to not really work and turns the audience off. But if I throw out those pillows, do some of my stuff that I know that works already, get that out there and kind of establish myself as a likable person, I get that equity that I can spend. And last question before we tune out, we get done here. Do you ever feel like you cash in all your equity? Because I sure don't. I feel like I'm one of these comics, because I'm typically I'm not really that edgy or dark. I can build equity, but I don't cash out a lot.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it that way.
No,
Like, you can't have too much equity. And no, I don't think I do. Like a lot of times, I haven't really spent it. Or, maybe I am and I don't know it, right? Like,
that
I
could
definitely
could be
need
my
their
case
trust.
too.
Right. I need them to trust me to take them on a ride that has a story associated with it, for sure.
On a fantastic joyride.
Fantastic voyage. Yeah.
Slide. Okay, we don't need
slide.
any of that. We don't need
Pour
these
one
two
out for
faces,
Coolio, folks.
We don't need these two faces doing any of that.
No.
Well, this has been a great episode. We want to thank you guys for listening. If you're not already, make sure you join the Facebook group. It's the Art of Bombing Bomb Squad. We post episodes and updates in there, and we try to get conversations started. Join that. Make sure you're following us on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. And if you like video, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, because we are putting out more video. Like this episode here, if you're listening to this, it's also going to be available in a video format. So you can go watch that on YouTube. So check those things out. We'll be back next week with episode 286 with another returning guest, my friend, Zach Lyman. We had a great conversation, and you're going to get a lot of great nuggets out of that episode. So till next week, have a great weekend, and thanks for listening.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production. Roar.